Hey you, welcome to the GreyTalks Podcast. Talks about great thinking, social skills, communication, personal development and team coaching. Because in a world that is black and white, we can all use some grey. My name is Lisette van Putten and I will be having these talks with you. I'm a social skills teacher and coach and I will be sharing my thoughts, knowledge and practical tips to create your own greatness. So stay tuned and enjoy this brand new episode. Let's get started. Let's do this. Welcome to the very first episode of the GreyTalks Podcast. I'm so excited to have these talks with you. As I said in episode 0 and introducing this podcast to you, I am really happy and really glad that it's finally there. I've been dreaming about this for the past 2 or 3 years, but people have been asking me for much longer to start a vlog or start YouTube videos. So now there's the Great Talk podcast. So I am excited. I'm ready. This episode is going to be all about grey thinking, what grey thinking actually is, what it entails, how you do it, what you need. So I am going to explain grey thinking, which is the concept that I created. With the frequently asked questions. And I mean, grey thinking it's not a word that people know, it's not a verb that people are familiar with. So I get a lot of questions when talking about grey thinking. And I thought, why not use those questions to actually explain what grey thinking is all about? So the first question I get a lot is, what is grey thinking? So let's start there. Grey thinking is consciously open-minded approaching people and situations. As I said, this definition of grey thinking will be repeated a lot in different episodes, but I will repeat it again slowly. Grey thinking is consciously open-minded approaching people and situations. And I actually came to this concept because I got frustrated with the world being really black and white, meeting a lot of narrow-minded people, and I thought I either be frustrated for the rest of my life or I'm going to create something and help people to open up their minds. And I do believe that your mind is like a muscle, because if we talk about things, how we perceive things, and how we think, we actually make it conscious. So we are aware of it consciously. That's the first word of the definition. So we're talking about our thoughts. That way, we make it into something because we are sharing it, and that's also the starting point of how you can actually change it or learn more things and start opening up your mind. So being consciously open-minded is very important. I say that it's about approaching people and situations because, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I don't think black and white thinking is a bad thing. It means that you have a perspective. You believe in something, you stand for something, and I think that's admirable. I think that is really nice. I think that is how life works. However, you cannot own the truth. So it's not all about your own perspective. There are different perspectives. And to approach people with an open mind, people and situations, because I added the both, like I have both things in the definition of grey thinking. It's becoming an active thing that you do. So it's not just something, grey thinking is not a passive way of thinking. It's an active way of thinking. You have to be aware of what you're doing, and that's why there's the word approaching is locked in the definition. As I said, people and situations. So I don't think Um, you only need to be open-minded in your approach when you're approaching a person and having a conversation with them. I also think that there are situations that might trigger you. There are people that might trigger you into black and white thinking. And both are both things need to be addressed when it comes to gray thinking, because as I say, it's not only about understanding others and learning more about others, but it's also about learning more about yourself. I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. So it's also about situations and not only about people. And gray thinking is a combination of different skills. So one of the skills is asking questions and asking follow-up questions, because I mean, giving the right answer is definitely, it takes skill and you need knowledge for that. But asking the right questions is even more important. So try to always be curious and ask questions. If you're not familiar with the way certain people do things or think about some situations or some theories, then the only way to come to a better understanding is to ask questions. Although we can ask the most beautiful questions, but if we don't actively listen to what has been said, it makes no sense. So, of course, another skill that you need to be able to think gray is actively listening. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I I noticed that a lot of people tend to listen to reply and not listen to understand. So they just listen, hear certain words, and that triggers them, or that sets off their own train of thought, and then they run with that. So they're not truly actively listening to what it is that you're saying. But for you to be able to think gray and to be consciously open-minded in your approach of people and situations, you need to actively listen and listen to understand. It's the same with an argument. If you're going into an argument with the main goal that I want to be right and I want other people to adapt my way of thinking and my perspective, I don't think you come a lot closer, and you're not even coming close to actually being able to compromise in a certain way. If you're going into a conversation, not even a discussion or a debate, but if you go into a conversation with the main goal to understand the other person, then you do you get closer together and you get to a better understanding of each other. So actively listening and asking follow-up questions is all about being curious, because when you're curious like a child and want to know and want to learn, that is when you actually are able to open up your mind and get closer together. But that's not all to gray thinking. There's also another part of gray thinking where it comes to being aware of perspectives. And first of all, it's about being aware of your own perspective. Know your own perspectives, because where do these perspectives come from? How do you adapt them? How do you came across the thing, like something that you are strongly believing? Is that because your parents told you so? It's part of the community that you're in, school, friends, family, or social media or other media? um, I think it's important to know your own perspective, because in order to be consciously open-minded in your approach to other people and situations, you also need to know what it is that you think and what it is that you believe. And sometimes we forget to address our own belief systems and address our own perspectives, because we are allowed to change our minds. We are allowed to get new information, which triggers us into thinking like, hey, maybe the perspective that I used to have is not working for me anymore, or it doesn't suit my current lifestyle or my train of thought or my mindset. So we do change, and sometimes we need to sit with ourselves and actually um, think about those things. Like, why are we thinking the things that we are thinking? Where do they come from? So that's also an important skill that comes with gray thinking. And along with your own perspectives, it's also about other perspectives. And the most important thing to do with other perspectives is to be non-judgmental, to not judge others on how they think. And sometimes that can be hard if it's totally different from what you think, if it's like it feels wrong to you, and then it can be really hard to keep an open mind and just listen. However, I think it's a better mindset to actually come closer together and to understand, because we also go to the assumptions, as I mentioned in the previous episode. I don't like it when people assume things. So when we hear a perspective, we tend to assume why it is that they think that and why they feel that way. But if we don't ask, how can we actually know and understand where they're coming from? So, actively listening, asking questions, knowing your own perspectives, and be non judgmental. Those four things are the main skill set you need to be able to think gray. So that's the first question, I think. I think I explained what gray thinking is. The second question I get a lot is why gray? Because gray has this, like for a lot of people, has this connotation of boring, dull, lame, this gray weather that we might feel a little bit depressed about. So gray is not like a vibrant color. A lot of people think that. So they're like, why gray? Well, first of all, because gray thinking is the next step of black and white thinking. If you have black and white thinking, where it's just you thinking about the perspective that you have and what you believe in, which is perfectly fine, again. And when you are thinking gray, you're actually aware of the fact that you have that perspective, perfectly fine. I like it. But what else is there on this topic, on this theory, on this situation? So, what other perspective is there? And in order to make gray, you need black and white. So, I thought if it's the next step of black and white thinking, you mix black and white and you get gray. And I don't think I should have gone with another color, even though it might have been more vibrant. I think a lot of colors already have certain meanings, so I don't want to step on anybody's toes when it comes to picking another color. And when it comes to like a diverse palette of different colors, that also already has a special meaning. So I thought, why not use gray? I mean, I do get the question if it has anything to do with 50 Shades of Grey. It does. I wanted to say it does not, but of course, if it's about having an open mind in approaching people and situations, it definitely also has something to do with that. Yeah, I'd say it has something to do with everything. However, me picking the color gray and using gray as a trademark for my business in the origin has nothing to do with any shades of Grey. So yeah, that's why I use Grey, and that's part of my like my brand. And then I have one question left. I do get a lot. I mean, they're valid questions, and please do ask questions. I hope with me also laughing a little bit about the questions that I'm using right now won't withhold you from asking any questions. Please do. But I just think it's really funny because when something is different from what you're used to, it raises a lot of questions. Because I get a lot, like most of the time when it comes to my business, think great. A lot of people forget the T. Um, and then if they do use the T, they ask why I use a capital T. Because, well, people forget the T. So if there's a big T in the end, you tend to read it. So it doesn't get, like, I hope it does, like, people don't forget the T in the end. And I think it's a nice, uh, it has a nice sound because great with an A, great. It's about like great minds think alike, also gray, like gray thinking minds also think alike. And it sort of happened to be very useful to use that T as well because now I have a whole brand which is about gray thinkers, gray teams, gray teaching, gray triggers, gray tips, gray tools, and these gray talks. So in the end, it actually also really worked out um, with what I wanted to share. So that's why there's a T, and that's why there's a big T, because don't forget to actually pronounce the T as well, because my company name is Think Great. Great. So I think that's it. To sum it up, GreyThinking is consciously open-minded approaching people and situations. And in order to be able to think grey, you need to actively listen, ask questions, be aware of your own perspectives, and be non-judgmental to other perspectives. And I use the color gray because in order to make gray, you need black and white. So you need a clear perspective on something. And that way you are able to think gray. And there's a T in the end because it sounds like great. So that's that's the summary of GreyThinking one-on-one. And as I promised, I with every episode I will share a GreyTrigger and a GreyTip. And sometimes they have to do something with the episode, sometimes they don't. But for this episode, I will definitely say that one of the great triggers that I have that causes me to think black and white, triggers me to think black and white, is when people don't listen to understand, when they listen to reply. So when you're having a conversation, which almost always turn into an argument because people are listening to reply. So they tend to take a few words of what it is that you're saying and they just go with it. And it's not at all what you mean, what you wanted to say. So they just create their own story. What happens with me if people tend to listen to reply is that I kind of get the urge of explaining more of what I was trying to say, which is a bit of a black and white approach because I wanted to like sort of push my perspective onto someone because I'm like, you're not listening to what I'm saying and I want you to understand. So I tend to like over explain myself and start talking more, and it's not helpful. um, so my great tip would also be to actually apply great thinking to myself and apply to actually actively listen and ask questions about their perspective. So when people are listening to reply and not listening to understand, there's an urge that they just wanna explain something probably, or they wanna see you, like they want you to see it in a certain way. Which the only thing I can do to come closer to this person is to ask questions and listen to what it is that they're saying. So actually listen to understand to them. And then hopefully when they're done with sharing their perspective, I get to invite them to listen a little bit to my perspective, which can be really hard. Some people just don't do it. I will talk about that in another episode. So, yeah, that's my great tip for today. If people tend to listen to understand, listen to reply and not listen to understand, start listening to understand yourself. Start asking questions. Listen carefully to what it is that they're saying. And then hopefully in the end, you can actually invite them to learn a little bit more about your own perspective. So that's it. That's episode 1, GreyThinking One-on-One. Next episode, I will probably talk a little bit on the great history, on how this whole concept came about, and why I started this, and what the struggles were, and yeah, talk a little bit about that. Thank you for listening to this episode of Great Talks. Please let me know what you think, ask me anything, and spread greatness by sharing these talks with everyone you think needs a little bit more grey. Don't forget to be great until our next Great Talk.